presents You Be the Judge every Wednesday at 6 p.m. I'm one of the co-hosts, Dr. Paul Dyer, and my other lovely two co-hosts, Marylin Pierre, who's running for circuit court judge. It's an inside joke for all you people who have never watched our show before. We'll get into that later, but we're jam-packed, and that's all I can say about that. Our lovely co-host, Marylin Pierre, who's running for circuit court judge of Montgomery County. And then we have Judge Claudia Barber. She'll be on sooner than later. We do like to say that our show is about information, understanding, and action. Understand what you're listening to. If you have any questions, please inbox us if we run out of time. If those of you listening online and all the iHeart and wherever you get your podcast channels, please inbox us, donate, share, and contribute because that's how we keep this show moving and alive. I also want to campaign for Marylin Pierre, who's running for circuit court judge in Montgomery County in Maryland, because this goes out across the United States. Send money. Marylin, Marylin for Maryland. Marylin Pierre for Maryland. Maryland, what is it again?
It's Marylin for Maryland, and the website is pierreforjudge.com. So it's pierreforjudge.com.
Thank you.
Send money.
Send money. Maryland doesn't like to do it often and ever, so I do it here on this show for her because I do believe in justice. We do have a special guest. We have several guests on. Kiana is going to tell you her story. Go ahead, Kiana. Introduce yourself. Tell us what's going on, and then Brandon can give us the fine-tuned parts of the legality of it because we have some legal minds that are on this show, so they're probably going to ask those questions. But Kiana, please tell us what's going on.
Yes, and thank you so much for having me on a short notice and being a part of this. And I've been actually going through this this legal situation since about 2011, at the end of 2011, and I'm still dealing with it today. In 2015, I was sentenced to a total of 8.5 years of prison time. And out of that time, I did 2.5 years. I was released early on parole, and that parole turned into probation. I started my organization, Life After Release. I started that in 2017. And since then, I've been out in the community doing the work. Most recently, in June of this year, I was scheduled to be released off of probation because I was considered a low-level offender. And my probation officer wanted to get me off of his books because he had a lot of people to monitor. And he went to both of my judges and he asked for permission from the judges to get me off of parole on probation. One of the judges said, absolutely sure. She hasn't been in any contact with the law in almost 5 years. I'm done with her. I'm good. But the other judge in the case, who had been problematic in my case from the very beginning of my case, he decided that he wanted to know more about what was going on with my restitution. And when he asked the question about the restitution, parole and probation responded and said that they never required me to pay any any restitution because they didn't have any orders from him. He rebutted to them and said that he don't know why they don't have his orders, but that he had given them orders and he wanted me to pay, and that they were to issue what is known as a VOP, or a violation of parole, on me. And that is what I'm currently going through right now today. I'm in an active violation of probation, pending my appellate decision. I go before the appellate courts on Monday. Brandon's not my lawyer in that case. Brandon's just the lawyer in the violation of probation case. But I do have an attorney that is representing me for the appeals part of it. And so it's my case is very, very complicated. And a lot of it has to do with just the way that justice is administered to folks in our state, right? And so having to go through this has been very toiling on me emotionally. The fact that I have a 5-year suspended sentence left, meaning that this judge, if he wanted to within his capacity, could violate me and return me back to prison for 5 years. That's the worst that can happen in my case. And so I've been reaching out to folks just to kind of walk with me through this. And, I don't want to go back to prison, right? And so just trying to figure out on a technical, what would be known as a technical violation, which the JRA had attempted to do some some justice around. However, there wasn't much that has been done under the JRA, and especially in my case, this judge could actually return me. So I'll open it up for questions. And Brandon, if I'm missing anything, this is where I am. If anybody wants to do court support or watch the courts with me in my hearing on Monday, you can do so remotely. I can get the information. I can get it to you, Dr. Paul, so you can give it out to folks.
Actually, you could just put it in the link. That'd be helpful, and then everyone
Okay.
can just click on it. The couple things I'm going to ask Brandon real quick is, what's the judge's name and what's going on with this judge? I do know he's a retired judge, but he's allowed to come back and work his cases. Is that correct?
That's right. It's Judge Nichols in Prince George's County, and essentially the way it works is that retired judges can come back and work cases. Retired judges can come back and still work some dockets. I mean, the situation is, I think Kiana did a really good job of laying out of what happened. Probation was going to let her go. I mean, she's done perfect. She obviously has not had, beyond not having any contact with law enforcement, she's absolute pillar of Prince George's County, the people she helps with, her organizations. So they're recommending to just end her probation early. And Judge Nichols pretty much just made the decision to find a reason not to, and brought up the restitution, and her being on probation for years and probation never telling her how to pay restitution, where to pay it, what she's supposed to do concerning restitution. That's probation's job. The judge is supposed to send the order to probation. First of all, it seems like the judge never actually sent the order. And then after the order gets to probation, the probation officer is supposed to put her on a payment plan that considers her finances, tells her how to make the payments. None of that ever happened until they're already about to release her from probation. And so it puts her in a violation of probation status, which, we definitely dispute that she really isn't in violation of probation if they never gave her any instructions on how to pay it. But that's the status her case is currently in right now.
Thank you, Brandon. And this is why we do You Be the Judge. I mean, we just have, does anyone, Judge Claudia Barber, what we've talked about these judges, and this is why this was so important to bring Kiana on, is to talk about why it's so important to understand who your judges are and what they're able to do and what their legality is. But how this seems egregious. And Brandon, as an attorney, is this personal for this judge? Has he stated so, or what is going? I mean, can it? I mean, that's more of a, as a public, we're confused. Not so much can he do it, but there's got to be a purpose of why he's doing
it. I don't think any smart judge would ever state
okay.
why they personally would have some sort of bias against the individual. So if he does have some bias, he definitely hasn't said so.
I think that I'm very familiar with Prince George's County Circuit Court. There are some judges of decades ago. When I say decades ago, I want to say 1980s and 70s. Another judge, Kenneth Johnson, on the Circuit Court for Baltimore City. I was clerking on the court at that time, and they developed a reputation for VOP, violation of probation. So they have this philosophy, if you will, that if you violate one iota of a penny off of whatever fine that you were required to pay, if you appear before them in a violation of probation proceeding, they will reinstitute the entire sentence, the original sentence. And it's a harsh penalty. But every judge is not that way. Judge Nichols is a white male, came out of private practice in, he had a practice in Laurel, Maryland, before he came on the bench. I've appeared before him before on a civil matter. So I know that the reason why we have this situation where we appoint judges and then allow them, particularly circuit court judges, because that's where this is to give the public an opportunity to choose who your judges are. And so he's retired, he's coming back on this particular case, and I am hoping and praying that the decision goes the right way, because this very much sounds more like a Meek Mill situation, where this extensive probation period is looming out there, and if you breach one little piece of it, the judge has the final say. But
to me, sorry to interrupt, but to me, this is a different situation, because Ms. Johnson is not alleged to have breached a condition of her probation, which is why I want to ask Ms. Johnson, how much restitution are we talking about?
Oh, I want to put it in the, and that's up for appeal. So I put 2 articles in the chat. This is, this officer and myself were charged with the same exact crime. She pled guilty. I actually went to court. That's why a lot of my rights are still intact. The restitution was imposed was actually, I think, 3 times higher than what was actually the actual amount of the theft that's in question. So the actual theft in the amount was $197,000. He made it $238,000 arbitrarily. That was, he just said, well, I'm going to add some interest to it. And
wow. So no payment plan to begin with. He didn't send it to, well, somebody didn't send it to parole and probation, and that's not your fault, because it was not your job to do that. And now he wants to hold you accountable for it and threatens your freedom if you don't abide by a rule that was not even your mistake to begin with.
Yeah, and I hate to bring, a bias into it, but, I followed this case of this Jennifer Sims woman who was a white woman who was a police officer in Prince George's County. And I think the most hurtful part of this was that we both had Judge Nichols.
Oh, okay.
And Judge Nichols called her, in the article, you can read it for yourself. He said she was a soccer mom. He said that he felt sorry for her. He felt sorry that he had to do this to her. He gave her 6 months. She was out in 3, and he returned her back to whole by vacating her entire ordeal after she came home. What is wrong? What's the difference between this white officer and me, a black? I have 2 sons that I'm supporting. What is the difference between, forget the fact that I'm still appealing the actual conviction of itself. Let's just go with the facts that is available to us right now. A white woman charged with theft over 100,000, a black woman charged with a theft over 100,000. The white woman was an officer of the law who was vowed to serve and protect. The black woman was just a black woman without that any of those educations or oaths. But she received a tremendously lesser sentence time, and she was returned back to whole. And this woman is being threatened with an additional 5 years of prison time to go back to prison.
Well, it's shocking. It is entirely shocking in my mind that this is happening to the extent that it hasn't been finalized yet. I'm hoping that your counsel of record will consider raising that similar, I guess, situation, but the difference is again, how judges are judging. But this is squarely one of those situations where, the whole issue of disparity of sentencing comes into play. And we can't let that go, because if there is disparity in sentences, that's the reason why, when former Chief Judge Barber formed this equity committee, Judicial Equity Committee, I was sitting up there waiting for real results. Now, see, real results would be you bring this to that committee and let them fix it and show them the inequities here. And see, if that committee can't look at this and see inequity, then the committee is just, fooling everybody. They're nothing. They're not, it doesn't matter. That committee was just formed for form purposes. And there's too much of that. We didn't heard enough empty promises. Mm-hmm. We've heard enough, empty statements, but we've got to come down to real business. Now, are you an equity committee that's going to look at inequitable sentences and fix them? Or are you just sitting there calling yourself you're on the equity committee? Because that's just, you're wasting everybody's time.
Can you talk about when that was formed, and how can people, equity committee, is it a body in place?
It was a Judicial Equity Committee that former Chief Judge, who just retired in September of last year, Marylin Barber, she formed. And this committee consists of a bunch of judges, and that's mistake number one. I mean, that's like the police, fixing monitoring the police, So, she doesn't have any input. She didn't have any input from civil rights organizations like the NAACP. She had forums, and people came forth during those forums because I participated in those forums. I know people came forth and described the inequitable treatment that they've received, from bar applications on down to disciplinary action from the Attorney Grievance Commission, disparities on down to, other issues that were raised about fairness and equity in the court system. But see, the realness of the committee is you're going to fix what's broken. If you're not fixing what's broken, you're wasting everybody's time. You're just blowing hot air. You're just not doing anything. You're just trying to do that just for performance, just to put on the show, just showboat the showboat. You've got to come real and clean and say, hey, Judge so-and-so, we have this situation here. We don't need a whole bunch of extra excuses, And see, the problem, now the reason why I compared this with Meek Mill, and I know the facts aren't exactly the same, but in Meek Mill's case, he acknowledges the fact that he had money. He was connected with a billionaire that also worked with a progressive state's attorney who got things changed and corrected for him. So, and then plus it became a national issue, and he had people down at the courthouse protesting his violation of probation.
Judge Barber, this is so, I know people who are listening to it who are not legal minded. It just seems like if you're caught behind it, you don't have a way of getting around it. And that takes the wind out of a thought. If we don't have the money, you don't have the ability, you don't have the means. If a judge or a court puts you behind the wall, it seems like you can't get out of it.
Well, see, that to me also goes to the heart of racism in the judiciary and racism in the system. And what I mean by that is that part of the racism that is to make the attack. It's not measured justice, and it's never measured justice. So you got lopsided sentences, but you also have a situation where you're looking at a situation where they know that this impacts people financially. And it's just the dig a wicked financial grave for you, make you go out on a limb with attorney's fees, because they know that some of their attacks is not designed for poor people to win. It's not. So the fight is not fair. It's just, I mean, it's just not right there. The fight is not fair.
Thank you, Kiana, for coming on. Marylin, you want to introduce Daniel, or Daniel, you want to just jump in?
Well, no. Just 1 second before we get there. I'm sorry, Daniel, but I just want to ask Ms. Johnson and Mr. Burrell what we can do to help, because there are a lot more people at the meeting than there were when she said it the first time.
Okay.
And then after that, we could go to you, Daniel. Thank you for your patience.
Well, for me,
this is such an important conversation. So please go ahead.
For me, I just want to say, of course, thoughts and prayers are always very helpful. We will be having a hearing in front of, and hopefully the appellate judges get it right. Hopefully the 3 appellate judges that are going to be hearing this restitution issue and the legal basis for it, hopefully they get it right. I'm praying, and pray with me that they get it right, because if they get it right and they vacate it, then Judge Nichols no longer has any power. But my sentiment there is that they rubber stamp a lot of those things. So if you can come down to the hearing on the 11th in Annapolis at 9 a.m. In courtroom 1, or if you can come online, I will drop the link to the chat at 9 o'clock a.m. in courtroom 1. You can watch it online. And then we have to start getting judges in here that don't think like that, that are not racist, right? Brandon Burrell is actually running for judge in Prince George's County. I'll let him talk a little bit about that. So it was through our partnership and our, the struggle that we actually had and we went through, and then, he saw and he was like, I don't want this to happen to other people. And so now he's put his hat in the race to be a judge so that this won't happen to anybody else. And so, somebody like him on the bench, that's actually making equitable decisions is what we need. And so I don't know how many folks are actually paying attention to judge races, but what you could do for me in your jurisdiction is make sure that when you're voting for judges, that you're really, really paying attention to who we're putting on the bench. Somebody put Nichols on the bench 15 odd years ago, and he's still coming back, which I don't understand that. But we have to pay attention, and that's one of the ways we can start to stop some of the things that are happening to Black and brown people.
What is going on with the current group who are running? What are they like in terms of sympathy, racial makeup, background, and having themselves been gone through something that would make them better understand the people they come in contact with?
So there, in Prince George's, there are 5 candidates. The current appointed judge was appointed, I believe, back in November. That's Judge Carol Cordair. She's a former prosecutor. She's a white woman. The 4 other candidates are 2 Black males and 2 Black women that are also running for the spot. So, but in terms of that question, I think if the appeals court doesn't take it out of Judge Nichols' hands, I think the best thing that we could do is to just put pressure on Judge Nichols. I think it was referenced before, when someone's on probation, it's just an incredible amount of deference the judge gets to pretty much do, what they want. You don't have a lot of the same constitutional rights, obviously, pre-trial that you do when you're on probation. So I think putting pressure on Nichols to do the right thing is really what the hope is going to be. I'm trying my best to get him to do the right thing in the courtroom, but a judge on probation too just has so much power to just decide. But I thank you, Kiana, for mentioning, I am also running for circuit court in Prince George's County. And I'm feeling really good about the campaign. And I think it was issues like this, disparate sentencing, a lot of rulings that I've experienced judges make that I've been really disappointed in, that made me decide to put my hat in the ring as well.
Here's the thing, and this is why Maryland's running. This is why we have good people running. But I wondered if Judge does not do the right thing, there is no repercussion. Is this correct? That's what you said this many times, Judge Barber. There's nothing we can do. She's going to go to jail for 5 years because of what a judge does, and there's no way we can get her out early. There's nothing we can do to this judge. He is untouchable. This is a revelation. I don't think American people fully understand the capacity of what is really at hand here.
Yeah, and I think it's untouchable more than really other roles are untouchable. Judges have absolute immunity. You couldn't sue a judge. Even the only way an appeals court is going to reverse what a judge is doing is if they're giving some sort of a legal sentence. If the sentence is still within the state legislature maximums, then that's fine. The judge has complete discretion to do what the judge wants to do.
Or if it could be shown that the judge was paid off to make their decision, I assume.
Right, and it's very difficult to find that type of evidence. But yeah,
Right,
you're going to find something like that, and I think that would definitely go a long way. And I think something to keep in mind about Maryland specifically is Maryland's maximum sentences for charges are, I think, just outrageous, and so that gives judges even more power. An example attorneys talk about frequently is simple assault. In most jurisdictions, simple assault is a 6-month maximum type of crime. In Maryland, the maximum for simple assault is second-degree assault, 10 years.
Right.
It's
We have a case now that I'm aware of on the Eastern Shore in which a judge did impose a long sentence for simple assault. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and judges will use it. So, I mean, if the legislature gives them the type of power, it gives them a crime that has a maximum that's long, you're going to get the type of judges that actually impose sentences like that. And that's really the way the balance is supposed to be set up, that it's really should be the legislature that is imposing laws and that the judges still have to follow. If the legislature makes the maximum lower, they can make certain statutes, the judges have to follow whatever the statutes say. So that the way the balance works is it's supposed to be them. And I just don't think I'm seeing a lot of legislative changes that are reining in some of these things that judges are doing.
Well, the other problem is that a lot of civil rights laws, for example, if there's disparity in sentences, the question is there a statute that has an enforcement penalty in it? And if there is none, then you don't have people, being held accountable for the consequences of disparate sentencing. That's part of the issue.
Please, everyone, check out the link to join in on the 11th to support Kiana. I feel so, my legs are chopped off. Like I've been punched before. This is worse. I've been shot at many times in my life and across the country serving the military, but this, I actually feel helpless. Like this is
just as bad as the Black woman in Texas who was sentenced to 4 years for illegal voting. Then you had a judge who also committed a similar offense and served no time at all. Just phoniness.
Daniel, thank you for your patience. What do you?
No, I mean, Dr.
Yeah.
Paul, I think we all of us should be outraged, right? When justice is not served and the court is when justice is delayed and is denied, it does impact all of us. So I join you and everyone. And Kiana, of course, thoughts and prayers are with you. But I believe electing, people in public policy that would ensure that we reduce the inequities that exist and that have existed for generations. It's important, and that's one of my impetus of running, because I've seen this on the economic justice side. And so, just briefly about me, I'm Daniel Karoma. I'm running from Montgomery County District 5, Council District 5. It's the only majority plurality African American district in Montgomery County, and it's also it has a neighborhood that have not seen any investment, any county investment in over 40 years, 4 decades. Again, it's a majority plurality African American district. It starts at Four Corners, it touches the Prince George's County line, and then 29, it touches the Howard County line, and then 128, which is Spencer Road, and it does include Leisure World. So places like Leisure World, Colesville, Cloverly, Buttonsville, Fairland, Briggs Cheney, Musgrove, White Oak. These are all communities. As I say, there's so many inequities that have existed over the past 40 years in this neighborhood. When the county was making investment to grow the economy in other parts of the county, no investments were made in our neighborhoods. And so I've seen the inequities in our educational system where, many of the free and reduced meals that are served in the school system here in Montgomery County are served in neighborhood schools where I live. I've also seen it in the housing, where the housing policy is in place, steer more, Black and brown people into renting as opposed to homeownership. There are very few pathways when it comes to, owning homes. Not only is it expensive to live here, but it's super expensive to even buy in Montgomery County. And as all of you know, if we want to reduce the racial wealth gap, we need to make sure we create more pathways for people of color, especially Black people, to own homes. And obviously, it also has shown its head in our economic development policies. I mean, the pandemic has, unveiled many of the inequities that many of us knew when it comes to access to information to Black businesses or minority-owned businesses, female-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, and disabled-owned businesses, but also when it comes to access to capital, right, or the availability of credit. So currently, I've spoken to over 10,000 small businesses because many of them are helped to get grants in order for them to survive the pandemic. I am the current county business liaison officer here in Montgomery County. My book of business spans 68,980 businesses. But I can tell you, those who have heard from the most, those who have suffered the most, those who closed the first few months, the businesses that closed, the first few months when the pandemic hit, were minority businesses. So that inequity have moved me where, as I was raised, that to whom much is given, much is not only expected, but what is required. I was like, I can't sit on the sidelines anymore. I need to run because I know where the bottlenecks are and I'm ready to fight to ensure that we have economic justice, to make sure we have housing justice and environmental justice, but also we have educational justice. So that's just a little bit about me. I bring 16 years of government experience. In this district, I started a program in 2008 in the height of the recession that helped working adults get the skills to get a job. When our early voting site was threatened, I became an advocate and have fought very hard to make sure we kept it. But I didn't stop there. I became the lead advocate. You can read about me on the Washington Post, where I fought hard since 2012 when I volunteered in the Obama campaign and to say we need a new early voting site in White Oak. And since 2012, it was only last year that the Maryland legislature passed a bill to establish this early voting site in White Oak, a place where, again, over 80% of the community members are minorities, but majority of them are Black people. So I can talk about all these things, but what's important is that I need your help. I need you to just check me out. And if you like what you see, please support me because listen, I want to be accountable to you. No special interest, no deep pockets, but the people. Because if I'm leaving the job I have right now when I'm elected to go into office, is because I want to make an impact. And much has been given to me. I've been blessed, right? From a kid in Sierra Leone to having a good education and having to have a job here. The only way I know I can give back is by serving the community in public service. And so thank you so much. And I look forward to any questions that you may have for me.
Daniel, Daniel, the question I have, it's real quick. It goes back to more Kiana. There's many people that are probably in your district right now that's probably going through some situation, and we can. How is there a way, business-wise, can we support a person like this, where it's not just financial, because financial is a big component of this when they have to pay for the Brandons and the Marylin and the attorneys who are working tirelessly to get this stuff corrected. Is there a way that we can support them as a community? Is there a way that you could devise a type of, not scholarship, but a fund?
Yeah, so at the end of the day, I mean, I don't know all the facts of the case, but I believe when it comes to, policies that were crafted at the state level, right? So we need to make sure we have, again, state policymakers in these committees who are ensuring that there's justice and it is also applicable across the board. But at the end of the day, I completely agree with you. We need to work together.
Is that Daniel's thing or is it mine? What's good? Can he break up on me or am I broken up?
Well, I hear you fine. I hear myself fine.
Yeah,
I see everybody else is okay. So Daniel must have frozen.
What was your question, Michael? You had a question.
Well, I'm in his district, and I have to say that the first time I saw some racial Black majority turnout at a D5 event was one that Daniel organized. And I was blown away by it. However, the vote turnout is where it falls apart. When people don't show up and vote, the number just betrays the cause. And I think in our district, I think he's running against Kate Stewart, I believe, right? Anybody else there?
No, actually, yeah. So Kate Stewart is in District 4 now, and I'm in District 5.
Right. It's been redistricted. But
Michael, to your point, so let me just let you know what people are doing now, right? Politicians didn't used to come to our neighborhoods to canvass, right? Because they would take us for granted. Because of the new early voting sites that's going to go into effect this year, people are already coming into our neighborhoods. But guess what? I've already beat them to that because people knew how much I fought and hard that I fought to establish that early voting site that we now have. So I agree with you that we need to turn out, and by the way, I'm organizing, Leo Franco is my campaign manager. He's on the Zoom. We're organizing a voter registration and a voter engagement event. Of course, I'm working with the faith communities. We're going to be doing souls to the polls to ensure that we have people come out, but anywhere we can amplify this message about the early voting sites in White Oak, it's going to be so helpful to not only our democracy, but also to voting rights and voting access.
And also there's a health fair coming to the White Oak Recreation Center this Saturday. So that's also going to be a good place and time to let the residents know that, by the way, this is going to be an early voting site, and these are the issues that you should be concerned about. And This is what you should be asking the politicians. I think Michael does a lot of good work in terms of educating people and what candidate to ask what question of, because a lot of times people want to talk about the schools. Well, not everybody has control over the schools. And so if you ask a candidate who's not running, who has no control over the school board when they get in office about the schools, nothing is really going to change about the schools. But if you ask the school board candidates about the schools, then you're more likely to be able to hold whoever gets elected accountable for what they said.
No, absolutely. So especially in this new district, Dr. Paul, so this district is prone, right? In fact, in the general plan that's been discussed right now, it's designated as a growth area. So which means you have developers eyeing this place right now, right? To see how they could come in and pick, right? So one of the reasons why some people are afraid of me running is because they know that, first of all, I cannot be bought. But second of all, they know where I'm coming from. I've lived in this neighborhood, in this community. I've organized in this community. As Michael is saying, we've worked together collaboratively, right? As what Dr. King would call the beloved community is what. So no one is going to come to me and tell me we need to gentrify my neighborhood and make it unaffordable for long-term residents or make it unaffordable for small minority, female, veteran, and disabled businesses to thrive here in the new District 5. There are going to be lots of proposals for development. And my eyes are going to be on the prize, which is how do we create more pathways to ownership?
Daniel.
So I'm not going to give away county land, right? I need to make sure we have, community benefit agreements, right, for county land. And if you're coming to us as a business and you need county resources, I need to make sure your workers have protection. So labor peace agreements, I'm going to be looking at as well, because in the last recession, what happens? Our community members who were last hired were the first to be fired, and I want to make sure that that does not repeat itself anymore.
Daniel, the question I have is that we know that people who are running for races, who are running for different seats, often say things that they are not able to do, right? We know that. We've seen it our whole lives. I'm 55, and I cannot remember a person that didn't say something that did not come to fruition, right? We have a current president who hasn't done anything he said he was going to do, ever, right? So here's the thing. What are people are saying that they're going to do, and what is it that you're going to do that if you don't get it done, how do you let us know that there's a reason why it didn't get done, or you just totally blew us off? Will you ever say that to us as a constituents?
So, Dr. Paul, I would say unequivocally no. If I know these things were not doable, I wouldn't do it. All the things I've talked about, I've done. So the testimony of me saying what I'm going to do, look at what I've done in the past when I was not in elected office, right? I started a program which now we're advocating to build an entire campus, community college campus, based on the program I started in 2008, right? I started advocating for the early voting site we had in Burtonsville, and we kept that, but I didn't stop there. I became the lead advocate for a new early voting site that's going to serve close to 14,000 of my neighbors. So in the last 2 years, I've worked with nonprofits and small businesses for them to survive. Dr. Paul, I'm not an elected official, and I've done that. So judge me because I can also assure you, the reason why I say I cannot be bought is because by the grace of God, when I'm in office, I'm not going to forget where I came from. Right. I'm going to make sure the community that has put me in office also is going to help me fight. Folks like Michael, right, who's been doing this work for years, his wife, his family, they've been, folks like Marylin, many of you who live, I see Sheldon Fisherman who is here, right? These are not progressive by the name only, right? But these are progressive who have done the work. Mm-hmm. And to me, these are the folks who will be behind me, like fighting with me when I'm on the county council to say, oh yeah, Montgomery County, remember the racial equity and social justice, bill that you passed? Well, it has no teeth right now. Let's make sure that the social equity and the racial equity and social justice bill is reflected in our budget. What investment are we making in the East County? How do we make sure, that our schools are getting better? But how do we make sure the housing becomes more affordable and also more available for our seniors, for our young people, for people of color, pathways to home ownership? How do we make sure in economic development we have more entrepreneurial ecosystem that provide access to information, access to credit, and the availability of credit? So these are things, specific things that I'm going to be keeping my eyes on, working with the community.
Well, thank you. That way, that is the answer I was hoping for. Marylin, what do you mean? You had said something.
Ed said something about.
Is it did
I
you put
said lots of things.
it in the chat? Did you write something in the chat? It's not straightforward. Did you write that?
Yeah. Well, because Meaton had a question in reference to judges receiving campaign contributions.
Oh.
And so, Meaton, do you want to go and ask your question yourself?
Yes. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'll be short and brief. I have one experience where judges receive campaign finance from a defense attorney's law firm, and then the judge didn't allow and didn't even see the perjury evidence and made a ruling in favor of the defense attorney without even seeing the evidence. And now I understand from Ms. Marylin's response that they can take the contribution, but don't they have to disclose that before the trial, number one, and then suppress an evidence in favor of the defense attorney? And is it like there is any conflict of interest like that? How they can do that? I don't know. I'm not an attorney, so I just wanted to throw the question out. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Mitchum. Anyone have any questions for Daniel?
Yeah. Who were you running against? And well, that's an important question.
It is.
Well, let me interrupt just 1 second. Okay, because and me too, and I'm going to go back and ask you a question, but we just want better flow. I was told that you do not run against anyone. You run for the same position as. So,
No,
Daniel, who are you running for the same position as? Because I have to remind myself that all the time.
Now, there are amazing people who are running. I'm not promoting any of them, but all I'm saying is that I'm the one with the most in terms of experience when it comes to time in government. This is my 16th year in government. I'm the one with the most policy accomplishments. Again, starting the Gilchrist Immigrant Resource Center, which is a job readiness program for adults, working adults, fighting to keep the only early voting sites in Burtonsville, becoming the lead champion for the new early voting sites in White Oak. And again, for the last 2 years plus, working with nonprofits and small businesses, especially minority, female, veteran, and disabled businesses get access to resources so that they could survive COVID. I'm the only candidate that have this record. And I believe that's what we need going into the county council, so that we're still in the pandemic, but by the time we're preparing policies as we're getting out of the pandemic, as I say, we make sure that we have educational justice, we have housing justice, and we have economic justice for current residents and future residents of the new District 5.
Comfort?
Yes, good evening. And I want to thank Mr. Corona for coming on the show. I have a very, important question. I really appreciate everything that you have been doing in the community.
Thank you.
I also have, based on my own personal experience, because my son was murdered by Montgomery County police officers in 2011, a little bit over 11 years ago, although we did not get any justice. I mean, everything was swept under the rug. In the process, I lose my home, lose my job. And I mean, to cut a long story short, I was practically destitute. So what is your take when nobody could have, seen this pandemic when it hit us in 2019? I know there are, mostly brown skin and black skin, mothers who are without their children and children without their parents. And I know the pain. So this is my passion, about homelessness. And that's why, I started this new business. I've been, meeting with the elected officials, all these elected officials, they're going to promise you heaven and earth, just like Dr. Paul said, before you get them into the office. But it's like they have amnesia once they're in office. They forget all about all these promises. I've met with a county executive. I've met with a director.
Comfort, what's your question?
Yeah, what is your position on the homelessness? Because I mean, the homelessness in Montgomery County is out of this world. And Montgomery County is one of the richest counties in the US. But the homelessness, you cannot even afford a shed. So how are you going to help the underserved who are going through the loss of a loved one and who doesn't know where the next meal is going to come from? What is your take on that?
So absolutely, I know exactly. By the way, my condolence to you again. I reached you and I talked when your son passed away, and I still know how much grief that the community, not only you, but definitely you, but the community faced because of that. So homelessness absolutely should be something that we continue to work on in Montgomery County. I know a new homeless shelter, year-round homeless shelter was just built. So that's one way. But I think we also need to address the mental health issue as well that comes with some of these, the state of homelessness, so that we don't criminalize homelessness, and we should never do that. And in your case, I think because of what happened to your son, some of the changes we're seeing now in Montgomery County had an impact, especially with the police accountability measures that are in place right now and the training. Your son's death not going vain.
I pushed for that pass. I'm very thankful.
I remember some of those conversations we had. So to be unequivocal, we need to hold police accountable. Right?
Yes.
Especially when someone's life is lost. We need to make sure the police are not investigating themselves. We need to make sure there's an independent body, a body that's doing that, and then making sure that it's. And I'm happy to see that at the state level, there's legislation that is being discussed right now, and I think they're going to vote on it next week. But also at the county level, this week, there was, again, the minimum threshold for members of the police advisory board that will basically oversee, the oversight board that would oversee some of these complaints that are coming from both residents, but also from their colleagues as well. I think there should never be a policeman pulling a gun when mental health is the issue. Right? We need to have our crisis workers there to intervene, but also mitigate. We should not have police engaging, except if they're trained to engage and where they're not using any lethal force.
I agree.
Thank you for that wonderful answer. Ms. Johnson, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I'm so sorry for what happened to you and your son. I didn't hear, and I'm not in your district, but I just wanted to know a little bit about. You talked about early voting sites. In 2016, returning citizens, folks who are released from jail or prison in the state of Maryland could vote, right? Mm-hmm. And what are your interests, or what have you done around the returning population? I have a goal with my nonprofit to engage 50,000 formerly incarcerated, directly impacted community members around voting, educating them around voting, and also making sure that they're registered to vote. Because a lot of people think that if you've been convicted of a crime and you can't vote, that's not true. As soon as you're released from your sentence, you can vote. And so we want to make sure that all the jails in the state of Maryland are creating not only educational pieces, but having drop boxes put into the jails for individuals who are being held on misdemeanor or being held pre-trial, so they can vote while they're incarcerated. Have you done any work in your community around this issue?
Well, Kiana, I need your help. And Leo, please put in my information, our contact, because what happens is that many a times I'm not the trusted voice in this space. And that's where you come in. I would work with you I'd work with organizations that are doing the work here in Montgomery County. I know our pre-release center does have, they do allow people to go in and do registration and do voter registration. And now, of course, with everyone who can request their mail-in ballots in the mail, so those who are returning citizens can request an early ballot through the mail and vote, vote by mail or through the drop boxes. But definitely, you are the experts in this, Kiana, and my campaign manager, Leo, is going to put my information, my contact information, so that we can work with you.
Ms. Johnson, what I find with that community is fear, because just like Judge Barber said before she left, the case of that woman who did whatever it was she was alleged to have done, who was given a 4-year sentence, really resonates in that community, and that's all they hear. They do not want to go back to jail again, and that is quite understandable. And so the most that we could do is try to educate that community and say, you are not going to go back to jail. This is what the law says. And I have given them the voter registration form and said, it's like, look, this is what it says over here. This applies to you. And so therefore you are able to register to vote. And yes, you are able to vote. And yeah, it's just getting over that barrier of, I don't want to be that woman. And I don't want to go to jail for 4 years just because I want to vote.
Well, as folks who are on here, what you can do to help the community, if you go onto the Department Motor Vehicles, they have the language wrong. When I walked into parole and probation, they were advising people wrong. They were telling people they had to wait 7 years. So the education, and the reason why we're so misguided is because a lot of elected officials, a lot of the AKAs, when I went to one of their voter registrations, they were telling people wrong. And so that is why I have a big push to go around the state and do a tour to be able to let the people know, coming from me, a person who was formerly incarcerated, to be able to let them know what exactly it is they can do and to engage them. I have a hopes to actually take the public defender's office and the parole and probation office with me when I go on this tour. So that those are the type of things that I would like to do. So if anybody would like to connect with me to help me go around this beautiful state to be able to educate my population, I would welcome the help.
Well, Kiana, Leo is going to reach out to you. I'm taking you up on your offer because, as I said, I acknowledge I'm not the trusted voice in this space, right? And coming from you, my goal is to make sure that you have all the power within your space, right? Because you're the trusted voice there. So I don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable thinking that, oh, well, because I'm trying to earn their vote. See, this is where, to me, it's beyond politics. It's enfranchising people who have paid their debt to society. It should be beyond politics, right? I'm not going to say, vote, register so you can vote for me. No, Kiana, you're the trusted voice. Let's get people to register. It doesn't matter if they vote for me. Well, it does matter, but even if they don't vote for me, that's fine. But my goal is that how do we make sure people feel, right, trusted again because they've paid their debt to society and they don't feel guilty for the rest of their life.
This is why, I love doing the shows we do, Marylin and Judge Barber, and you be the judge. This is incredible because we want people to get the information, have an understanding what the information is, and then they can take that into an action. There's every show I do, I want to inform, have people have a true understanding, and then you can make a choice of whether you want to be involved or not involved. I am actually very shameful to people who don't want to get involved because those are the same people who always end up complaining and always seems like they have something to say about how things aren't changing, but they're not doing anything. They're lip service. They're not getting their hands dirty. They're not doing anything. And it bothers me because as a person that does and works and does, we have to put the boots on the ground and do the work because otherwise it stays the same. Nothing changes. And if nothing changes, the only community that really gets affected is the Black and brown community. Everyone else can go literally about their business and be like, well, nothing changed, but I don't get pulled over. Nothing changed, but I don't get draconian sentences. Nothing changed, but I don't get accused of stealing something I actually paid for. Nothing, it's got to change. And the only people that really got to change is not just the people it affects, but it affects us all as human beings. And that's something we got to get across. It's not just because it only affects returning citizens. Really? Is that the only reason why? Because you had a friend, cousin, brother, sister? That's the only way you're going to get involved in doing something like this? Because you know someone who's a returning citizen? Why not do it because it's fair? We got to have people like, I know no one in prison. I've never heard about people being in prison, but I just heard this information, and people need to know this education. That's why you get involved. It's not because I know someone. If we just do things because we know someone, then what the hell? We're not a human race anymore. We're a segregated race that has everything to do with something else that we have something to do with. I'm sorry to get on my soapbox and rant. Marylin gave me
your everything you're saying is true. I thought about printing up a bumper sticker and putting on all the signs I see as I go through Pennsylvania. Hate thy neighbor. I thought maybe that might accomplish something and make people think of all the vitriol and hatred they're expressing. Mm-hmm. Maybe it would come back to them, but I doubt it. They probably would agree with that.
Thank you, everyone. We're at a limit, not a limit of having a conversation, but the live broadcast. We'd like to keep people on a time limit, and we're here every Wednesday at 6 p.m. You be the judge. If you ever want to join us again, please reach out if you have any questions. We're definitely going to have Brandon come back on our show to talk about him running for judge in Prince George's, as we have Marylin running for circuit court judge here in Montgomery County. We have some incredible people that come on our shows. Thank you, Daniel. Always welcome to come back and just listen in, chime in, and just give your voice about what's going on with your campaign. This is not the last time of coming back on, and this is definitely not the first time. So welcome again to our family of You Be the Judge. Kiana, I don't know. I'm not gonna cry in front of you because I'm not. Not that because I don't. I'm hurt. I'm hurt because you could literally go to jail for 5 years because no reason, just because. And there's nothing we could do about it except shake our fist at a judge that says, so what, you shake your fist at me? I will still be on my Chesapeake boat in this June, and I could care less. And I'm thinking, and I got thoughts in my head. So, and I'll contact you off air again. Thank you for all your questions and comments. If anyone have anything to say before we chime out, Marylin?
Thank you very much, everyone. It was really interesting and exciting having you. I think Daniel has something he wants to say.
Yeah, I think Will has a question. I want to make sure I miss.
I expressed an interest in the following proposition. The incarceration rate in the United States is much higher than other developed countries. Mm-hmm. Are they doing something right that we're not doing? And has there been any study of this? I've never seen one. A study of comparative criminal processes. And the question, is there any interest in this group in trying as a long-term proposition to get the United States, people in the United States to do comparison of the criminal process in other developed countries?
Will, I know one answer, and I'm interested. And here's the one answer I do know. The prisoners in the United States makes more money for the United States than any other prison system in the world. I do, because of the labor they get used for. So it's such a big business for prison labor in the United States, where other developed countries don't use their prisoners as labor like the United States does. I do know that.
Also, this is Teresa. I was going to be quiet because it was such an interesting discussion tonight, and thank you to our presenters.
But just like you're saying with labor, but also it's written in our Constitution. You know, it's in our Constitution. So, you know, when they got rid of slavery, this was the new slavery, just like Michelle Alexander said. It's what it is, and that's why the criminal justice system, we have the highest incarceration rate of any really developed and civilized country. That is the reason, and package all of that up with racism. And then you have the impetus to also show how it's such a large number of people incarcerated.
It's powerful. Daniel, before we take off, anything, not Daniel, Brandon? Hold on, Daniel. I meant Brandon.
It's definitely a really interesting subject. I think there's a long history to it that I do think is tied to slavery, tied to tough on crime policies, tied to the drug war. And we sentence a lot harsher in this country than other countries. There have been studies that have looked into it. I don't think Americans are necessarily more likely to be criminals, but I think our judges are more likely to sentence people a lot more harshly. And I think that there's often been a thought in America that if you're tough on crime, you reduce crime. And I think time has showed us that that is not true. And if you ruin a lot of lives when you're giving people, like we were doing in this country, decades in prison over drugs. It's not just the individual. These individuals all have families, and you increase recidivism and destroy communities. And that's what has happened. And I think that it becomes a situation that is snowballed.
I didn't, when we're getting decades for assaults, we have other issues. And young children are getting decades for assaults. Daniel, anything, our last words?
Yeah, so all these are interconnected. I mean, our economic justice is connected to our racial and all the inequities that we see, because as all of us have said, for many years, we've criminalized poverty, right? People who are poor are seen as criminals. Again, I'm asking for your support because this District 5, there are people who are looking at it right now because it's prone to be developed. And we've all seen in many cities when these people come in and how they gentrify the place, they move Black people out and brown people out, and then they turn the entire neighborhood. It becomes even unaffordable for those who are long-term residents. My goal is to make sure that that does not happen in the new District 5. So I need all your help and all your support. Again, Leo, my campaign manager, has put in my website on the chat. Please send me an email. I'm ready to meet with any other groups you have. If you have 5 friends that want to meet me, I'm more than willing. But thank you, Dr. Paul, and thank you to my good friend and amazing community leader, Marylin, Pierre.
You got to say lovely. You got to say lovely friend, because you got.
You want to get me in trouble. Marylin and I go.
Well, I have seen Daniel's wife, so no, he does not have to say lovely because she is gorgeous, and I don't want him to lower his standards like that. So yeah. Thank you so much, Daniel, for being here. This was wonderful. And thank you so much, Ms. Johnson, Mr. Burrell. I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Corral. Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Burrell. Judge to be Burrell. And we have a Judge Burrell in Montgomery County, right? So
I do.
So they'd be like, you guys could do